Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold, muddy, and just a little bit unjust into the daily life of a medieval slave. Imagine it's still pitch dark outside, the fire's long gone out, and the rooster's already on his third crow. You're awake, not because you want to be, but because your straw stuffed bedding is so pokey it could be legally classified as a medieval torture device. There's a low wind outside, rattling the wooden shutters that don't really shut, and you can already hear someone yelling about sheep. You blink, stretch your legs, which are sore from yesterday, and hit your head on the low beam above your bed. Again, you might own a wooden bowl, a knife so dull it's more spoon than blade, and a single tunic that hasn't been washed since last Easter. But you definitely do not own this home, this land, or your own freedom at SO. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not post your location and local time in the comments? It's always cool to see who's drifting off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Chapter 1. Woken by a rooster. Not a dream the morning routine, if you can call it that, is a scramble. Your day starts hours before any noble lifts a finger or a goblet. You slip into stiff boots, stuff a crust of stale bread into your mouth, and head out into the chill. You don't get a breakfast bell. You get shouted at by the Reeve, the estate manager, who once smiled in 1282 and regretted it ever since that you're one of dozens, maybe hundreds, of field workers owned, yes, owned, by a local lord. Historians still argue whether medieval serfs counted as slaves, since technically they couldn't be sold individually like in chattel slavery. But try explaining that nuance when your body belongs to the land. Your choices are pre approved by someone wearing a velvet doublet, and your freedom costs more than you'll ever earn as you head toward the fields. The air smells of damp soil, livestock, and something weirdly fishy. That's probably the tanner's corner. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, turning the thatch roof cottages gold for a minute before everything goes beige and brown again. Your fellow laborers are already muttering. One of them claims he saw a bad omen in the sky last night, a glowing tail across the stars. Comet, someone says. End times, another whispers. You're too busy dodging a puddle of something suspicious to worry about celestial events. You're more concerned whether today is a boon work day, extra unpaid labor you owe the Lord, or just regular unpaid labor. You reach the fields just as the oxen are being yoked. If you're lucky, you're on side duty. If you're not, you'll spend the next 6 hours bent double pulling weeds, rocks, and the occasional prehistoric artifact out of the earth. Seriously, someone once unearthed a Roman coin here. You kept it, then immediately lost it down a latrine hole. Classic that it's not all doom and tillage. Every so often, someone cracks a joke about the priest's wig, or someone lets one rip, so dramatically the whole row erupts into giggles. Yes, even in feudal servitude, fart jokes remain eternal that mid-morning. You pause to stretch your back, eyeing the manor house on the hill. It's the kind of place you'd only visit if summoned or punished. From here, it looks like a castle, though you know the kitchens are filled with shouting cooks, and the air constantly smells like boiled cabbage, and wet if you are, as you glance up, a falcon circles overhead. Someone says it's a lord's bird, trained to hunt hares. You imagine what it'd be like to fly like that, far from the fields, the reeve, the obligations, just soaring. But then the falcon dives, and so do your hopes. The reeve's voice cracks through the field like a whip. Back to it, no idling. You shuffle forward, your boots sucking into the mud. A nearby woman curses as she loses a shoe, her bare foot squelching directly into something that may once have been fertilizer. Back in the village, someone's hammering already. A carpenter, lucky enough to have a skilled label attached to his name. You envy him a little. He might still be unfree, but he can negotiate. You, on the other hand, are basically a walking tax write-off. Your hands are already rough with calluses, your nails permanently dirty, and your muscles aching away that even sleep doesn't cure anymore. But you keep moving, because if you stop too long, the reeve notices. And if the reeve notices, the lash comes out. Not every time, but enough to keep you from testing and point one strange thing. There's a rumor going around that the lord of a neighboring estate freed his slaves. Not out of kindness, but because the paperwork was annoying. Historians still argue whether that counts as manumission, or just outsourcing oppression. The sun crawls a little higher. Not that it helps much. You glance at the horizon and wonder what it would take to walk over it. But you don't. Because even in a world without fences, you're still trapped. You push through the last rows of barley, your breath steaming in the morning air, hands raw from the work. A rat scurries out from under a mound of hay, pauses, then dashes off. You consider your spirit animal. And as you lean on your side for a second too long, the reeve starts walking your way again, shouting something about lazy bones. You sigh, raise the blade, and go back to work. Chapter 2: Bread, onions, and someone else's goat. You finally stumble back toward the village square, if you can call it that, a muddied patch between the alewife shack and the dung heap, both competing for worst smell. The sun is still creeping across the sky, so technically it's morning, though you've been awake long enough for it to feel like a second lifetime. Breakfast, or what passes for it, is waiting, not in some warm kitchen with clattering spoons and sizzling bacon. Please. You sit cross-legged outside your hut, using a flat stone as a table, and unwrap a cloth bundle. Yesterday's bread, hard enough to qualify as a weapon, and a sliver of aged onion. The goat's milk you hope to save has gone sour, but you drink it anyway, because stomach cramps are preferable to hunger. Just then, a voice screeches over the din of bleating animals. It's your neighbor, Gerard, 50, stooped, and somehow always covered in chicken feathers. He's pointing at you like you just hexed his wife. "That's my goat," he yells, jabbing a finger at the mangy creature licking crumbs from your doorstep. It's not his goat. It's not even your goat. It just kind of lives here now. Still, Gerard isn't backing down. He lurches forward with the confidence of a man who once spoke to a knight and hasn't stopped talking about it since. A small crowd gathers, because nothing spices up a dreary morning like a full-blown goat custody dispute. You don't argue much. You just shrug and say, "Let the reeve decide." That shuts him up. No one wants to deal with a reeve before midday, not even Gerard. You toss the goat a crust and lean back against your doorway, watching your breath cloud in the cold. Your boots are already caked in the same mud from the fields, but now you're tracking it into your hut. Doesn't really matter. There's nothing in there worth protecting. A straw pallet, a chest with a broken latch, and a hand-carved spoon that somehow disappeared last Lent. Nearby, a group of children chases a chicken through the muck. One kid shrieks with laughter, the others pile on, and the chicken, possibly the fastest creature in the village, makes its escape beneath the wattle fence. You smile, briefly, then remember you'll be back in the fields before long, and the smile evaporates like morning dew. The baker's boy passes, whistling and carrying a basket of hot loaves. The scent hits you like a warm slap. Real bread, fresh bread. You contemplate mugging him, but decide against it, mostly because he's bigger than you, and also because you're not a criminal. Just a property that's weird, isn't it? You're not considered fully human in the eyes of the law. You're somewhere between livestock and tool. If you're beaten, no one blinks. If you try to leave, they come after you. If you die, your family still owes labor in your name until the seasons end. Historians still argue whether this level of bondage was truly slavery or just highly inconvenient freedom. Potato, potato. A cart rolls by, drawn by an ox that looks about 2 centuries old. It's driven by a man in a wide-brimmed hat who smells strongly of fish and bad choices. He shouts something in Latin. No one understands, but it sounds urgent. So everyone gets out of the way. The cart hits a rut, tilts dangerously, and then rights itself with a wheeze of effort. Someone claps. The driver waves like royalty. You finish your onion slice just as a church bell tolls once, an ominous reminder that it's time to return to work. You trudge toward the tool shed, hoping for something slightly less backbreaking than side duty. Maybe ditch digging, maybe haystacking, maybe even pig herding. Pigs are smarter than most people in this village, and slightly more polite. As you pass a communal well, a girl you half know offers you a pear. It's wrinkled and bruised, but sweet. "Found it near the hedge," she says and winks. You thank her, wondering if it's a gift, a flirtation, or a trap. Either way, you eat it. This is a world where you don't say no to fruit, at the tool shed. The bailiff is already assigning duties. He's a lord's man, always clean-shaven and slightly smug, like someone who enjoys yelling but tries to pretend he doesn't. He points at you and says, "Woodpile!" Could be worse. The woodpile is half a mile away, past the chapel and the abandoned beehives. You grab a hatchet and head off, the mud clinging to your boots like it has abandonment issues. Every few steps, you slip, regain balance, and mutter a quiet curse. At least out here, no one's watching, except maybe the goat, who's inexplicably followed you again. You swing the hatchet in steady rhythm, cutting logs for the manor kitchens. It's monotonous, but you fall into a kind of trance. Chop, breathe, stack. Chop, breathe, stack. Your mind wanders. You imagine a world where you're free. Maybe you own a cottage. Maybe you trade pottery. Maybe you don't wake up dreading every tick of the day. Then the hatchet slips. IT nicks your hand. Not badly, but enough to bleed. You wrap it in your sleeve and keep going. You can't stop. If you fall behind, someone else picks up the slack, and resentment spreads like mold. Nearby, a young boy sings a tune while collecting kindling. It's off key and cheerful, something about a knight and a lady and a very unconvincing dragon. You hum along without realizing. For a moment, the world is just that song, the trees, and the rhythmic thud of your axe. Then someone calls your name, loudly. It's the Reeve. You sigh, plant the axe in the stump, and turn to face him. He's got that look, the one that says, "Someone messed up, and I've already decided it's you." You brace yourself, mentally reviewing the morning. Did you forget to return the spade yesterday? Did Gerard finally complain about the goat? Nope. Turns out the Lord wants his hearth restocked before sundown, and there's short 3 bundles. You nod, say yes, sir, and get back to chopping. Because that's what you do. Chapter 3. Fields, mud, and never-ending wheat. You drag the last of the firewood into the manor's outer yard, your arms trembling like overcooked noodles. The load smells like pine sap and effort, and your tunic is so damp it might spontaneously start growing mushrooms. A page boy takes a bundle with a grunt of disapproval. He's 12, shoeless, and somehow still acts like he outranks you. He does. You take the opportunity to breathe. Just stand there for a moment, staring at the great stone walls of the Lord's estate. Thick, moss streak towering. It's not exactly a castle, more of a fortified manor, but to you it looks like a monument to every no you've ever heard. No, you can't enter. No, you can't rest here. No, you can't eat from the kitchens unless there's leftovers, and you grovel for them. Someone calls for you again. It's field work time. Because of course it is. You head out with the others, a muddy parade of hunchbacks and chapped hands. The path to the fields is well worn, carved by centuries of foot traffic and complaints. You pass a crow pecking at something suspiciously unidentifiable and make a mental note not to think about it again. The fields themselves stretch endlessly. Barley here, rye over there, and in the distance, a patch of peas that hasn't grown properly since the summer the priest swore he saw angels dancing in the orchard. You get assigned to the rye patch, already tilled but littered with stones that apparently have to be cleared. This means crawling along the ground on your hands and knees, collecting rocks, and occasionally fighting worms for territory. The soil is damp and sticky, clinging to your sleeves and knees like it's trying to make you part of it. Your fingers are numb before long. Your lower back begins to protest, and you start wondering how humans ever got suckered into agriculture in the first place that, oh, that's right, slavery, enclosure, the collapse of Rome. Take your pick. Historians still argue whether this kind of labor was always as miserable or whether the Middle Ages just perfected the art of making everything slightly too hard to enjoy that a young woman next to you groans. At least the wheat feels worse, she mutters, brushing a slug off her sleeve. She's right. The wheat field is cursed, overrun with stinging thistles and bees with a vendetta. You don't correct her. Misery loves a scapegoat. Even if it's a cereal grain, the sudden gust kicks up dust and a few loose barley husks, sending them spinning into the air like tiny papery tornadoes. You sneeze. Twice. A nearby worker mutters something about bad humors. He offers you a necklace made from animal teeth. You politely decline. Break time arrives. Unofficial, of course. You collapse beside a low stone wall that divides this field from the one over, resting your arms on your knees and staring blankly at the horizon. It's not much of a view, just more fields, some scraggly hedges, and a distant forest that whispers freedom but probably means wolves. One of the older men starts talking about the past. Used to be, this land belonged to nobody, he says, picking a beetle off his bread and eating both. Back before the Lord's fence it all. He sighs. Could wander where you wanted. Fish the river. Sleep under stars. Everyone nods like it's a bedtime story. You wonder if any of it was ever true. Then someone brings up the black earth.is, the patch of soil that's richer, darker, and never seems to dry out. A few claim it was the site of a Viking burial. One guy swears his cousin found a gold brooch in there, but then vanished. Another says he saw glowing lights there once, probably will-o'-the-wisps or drunk monks, depending who you ask. You've worked near it. All you saw were more rocks. Still, it's a good distraction from your aching limbs and the way your toes are slowly fusing with your boots. You manage a chuckle when someone jokes, maybe we should sell tickets. Everyone laughs, then remembers you don't even own your own name. Back to work. This time it's sowing, planting seeds in the long furrows carved into the soil. It's hypnotic in the worst way. You step, bend, drop cover, repeat. You try to keep your rows straight. The reeve doesn't tolerate crooked sowing. So like a drunkard, and you'll reap like a fool, he once shouted. You've never forgotten it. Mostly because he made the guy who messed up redo the entire field alone to SU plant. You spot a worm so long to qualify as a medieval noodle. You name a herald, whisper, good luck, and keep going. Small victories. Eventually, the sun shifts again, casting long shadows across the rows. The sky darkens a bit. Clouds are moving in. You hear a distant rumble. Rain? Thunder? The wrath of God? You'd honestly take any of the above if it means a break. But no such luck. Someone starts singing a slow work song. Someone would call an answer rhythmic and easy. You join in, not because you want to, but because it's either sing or scream. The song carries across the field, mixing with the sound of boots squelching and birds circling overhead. It feels almost like community. You all know the same struggle, the same soreness, the same Lord who taxes your sweat. Then the bell rings, not the church one, the manor bell, a signal. Field work's done for now. You don't cheer. You just stop. You stretch your back, brush off some mud, it clings like guilt, and shuffle back toward the village. Another day in the dirt. Another dozen hours paid in nothing but fatigue, and maybe, if you're lucky, a slightly less rude dream tonight. And as you cross the field's edge, you glance back at your crooked sewing lines, the distant manor house, and the goat following you again. Yeah, just another day in paradise. Chapter 4. Serfdom versus slavery, semantics or survival. You're halfway back to your hut when you catch wind of another argument, this time louder, more heated, with actual audience participation. A group is gathered near the well, gesturing, muttering, and occasionally tossing side eyes toward the blacksmith's lean-to. You approach out sheer boredom, rubbing your sore shoulder, and catch the tail end of someone yelling, it's slavery, I tell you. Ah, here we go again. The serf versus slave debate has returned. It always does, like fleas in summer or leaky roofs in spring. This time, the instigator is a cobbler who read something in a priest discarded scroll last week and now considers himself a legal expert. If you can't leave, you're a slave, he says. Doesn't matter if they call you a serf. The blacksmith's wife snorts. We're not bought or sold like animals. You sure about that? Mutters a shepherd, who once got traded to a neighboring manor in exchange for 2 barrels of ale and a mule with anxiety issues. You stay quiet, but the conversation echoes in your head. Historians still argue about this very thing. Some say medieval serfs weren't technically slaves because they weren't owned by individuals, just bound to land. Others argue that's a distinction without a difference. After all, if your lord can decide where you live, who you marry, and how many days you work, what's left? Your body might not be bought and sold outright, but your time, your labor, your choices, all spoken for. The debate gets louder. Someone brings up the villains, those slightly freer peasants who sometimes paid rent instead of working. Then someone else points out they still couldn't leave without permission. Freedom with a leash, he says. You edge away, back toward your hut. Arguing about freedom when you've got laundry to do feels a bit rich. Your hut, by the way, is barely holding it together. The thatch leaks in 3 places, and one wall leans like it's had a few too many. You duck inside and light a stub of tallow candle, which smells like despair but does the job. You peel off your outer tunic, set your tools by the door, and realize you've got hay stuck in your sock again. How? It's unclear. You grab a piece of linen to patch the elbow of your shirt. As you sew, the words from the well bounce back again. We're not bought or sold. A few years ago, you remember when a family from the next village disappeared overnight. Whisper said their lord did sell them. Debt repayment, maybe, or punishment. No one ever found out. But the story stuck. Just because it's not common doesn't mean it can't happen. The candle flickers. Outside, the rain starts to fall in a soft, steady drizzle. You exhale and try to shake the tension from your shoulders, but it lingers, a quiet weight, that a knock comes at your door. A girl from across the way, Emily, pokes her head in. She holds out a small cloth wrap package. My gran made extra stew, she says, not quite meeting your eyes. It's mostly parsnip. You take it, nodding your thanks. She smiles, then vanishes back into the wet night like some kind of vegetable fairy. The stew is warm, if bland, parsnip and mystery root, with a hint of boiled optimism. You eat sitting on your pallet, listening to the rain thrum on the roof. Your goat curls up in the corner, snoring. Yes, your goat now. You've both given up pretending otherwise. As you eat, you drift into a thought spiral. What would freedom even look like? What if you left? What if you could? There are stories of runaway serfs making it to the city, blending in as day laborers. The rule is simple. If you survive there for a year and a day without being caught, you're free. Technically, unless someone recognizes you, or you starve, or the city guards are bored. A local boy tried it once. He was smart, quick hands, quick feet. Made it all the way to Lincoln before getting picked up trying to sell a second-hand candle mold. They brought him back. Public flogging. Made an example. You were forced to watch. You still remember his scream. Still remember how the reeve smiled a little too much. The stew finishes. You lick the bowl clean, because every calorie counts. Then you stretch out on the pallet, staring at the ceiling beams. You can see where the spiders have rebuilt their webs since you last swept. Efficient little things. The candle dies. The hut dims. Rain keeps falling. And you think again, serf or slave? Does it matter? At the end of the day, you're still tired. Still aching. Still owned. You close your eyes and dream. Not of freedom, but a world where you don't have to spend every minute debating what kind of prisoner you are. Chapter 5. Midday meal and a lesson in obedient sleep doesn't last long. Not when dawn is basically a screechy rooster with an agenda. You're up again, blinking to the haze of too little rest and aching joints. It's damp. It's cold. It's your life. Today, you're scheduled for threshing, the joyous act of beating grain with a flail until it gives up its precious kernels. It's like medieval anger management, except you're not allowed to hit the person who assigned you the job. You trudge past the manor yard, boots sucking at the mud with every step. Someone's already lit the communal fire pit, and the scent of smoke rolls through the air like a weary sigh. You pass a few others heading out too, grumbling greetings, scratching heads, coughing up yesterday's dust. It's a parade of sleep-deprived resilience to be by the time you reach the threshing barn. The reeve is there naturally. He's got his arms folded like he invented supervision. You nod. He doesn't nod back. Classic. You grab your flail, a long stick connected by leather to another, slightly less impressive stick, and get to work. Swing, thump, swing, thump. The rhythm is hypnotic in that please let something interesting happen kind of way. After an hour, your arms are noodles again, your back has filed a complaint with the medieval HR department, and your hands are blistering. Again, the grain pops free in uneven bursts, little golden specks of victory in a sea of pain. Every now and then, someone starts humming a tune, old folk songs you don't remember learning but know by heart anyway. Songs about maidens, monsters, and an unusually vengeful goose. You hum along. During one of the rest breaks, you crouch near the barn door, sipping lukewarm water from a shared jug that tastes like regret and bark. That's when the Reeve walks by again and without preamble says, "You didn't bow deep enough this morning." You blink. "Sir, when I passed." You barely nodded. Disrespectful. You stare at him. It takes every ounce of willpower not to respond with, "Maybe I was too busy not collapsing." Instead, you mutter, "My apologies," and bow properly, deep low, neck exposed. That's what he wants. Deference, dehumanization, daily reminders of your place. He walks off, satisfied. You go back to flailing, this time picturing his face on the sheaves. It helps. The next incident happens just before lunch. You and the others are washing up, lucid to find as wiping your hands on a damp cloth that's seen better decades, when a younger boy, maybe 10 or 11, asks if he can eat with you. His name's John. He's new to the manor, traded in from another estate when his father died, and the mother couldn't manage their labor quota alone. You nod and share a turnip slice. He pulls out a hunk of bread, so stale it could knock out a horse. Together, you chew and sit in the shade of a half dead elm tree. Then the Reeve comes back. Again. Because of course he does that, he eyes the boy. "That one belonged to Widow Ann?" You nod. She didn't ask to have him sit with others. They're still under penalty for last season's shortfall. He gestures. "Off, boy." John hesitates, confused. You watch his face crumble, then rise quietly and walk away. You say nothing. What can you say? That this isn't fair? That punishment by proxy is ridiculous? That children shouldn't be tools? Sure. All true. But you've got a flail and no leverage. So you stay seated and hate yourself a little. After lunch, if you can call it that, you're sent to help clear the path between the fields and the mill. A tree branch fell in last night's storm. Two others are with you. Barbara, who sharpens tools, and old Hugh, who's missing 3 fingers and a sense of humor. Together, you hack, drag, and swear the branch into submission. Barbara tells a story about a nearby manor, where the lord got so drunk he forgot which villagers he'd punished and pardoned everyone by mistake. Hugh says that's nonsense and probably a trap to test loyalty. You laugh anyway. Because even false hope is still hope, as the sun begins to dip, you head back through the village. Smoke curls from the chimney of the alewife's home. Someone's burning meat, not intentionally. A couple of kids run past shouting something about frogs. You check your pockets, empty, and sigh. Evening is the only time you get a sliver of peace. You sit outside your hut, sharing your last crumb with the goat. Yes, still here, and watch the world dim. The sky turns bruised purple. The stars blink awake. Somewhere, a lute plays badly. You breathe. But it doesn't last. The bailiff appears, striding down the path like a storm cloud in a fur-lined cloak. He stops at your hut. "You were late with firewood delivery yesterday," he says. "Don't let it happen again." You blink. "I brought 3 bundles." "And the hearth was cold by dusk," he says, already turning away. You close the door after he leaves and lean against it. Heart thumping. Hands clenched. Because here's the thing. It's not about firewood, or bowing, or lateness. It's about control. And as you lie down, staring at the ceiling beams once again, you realize something that scares you. They can't take your will, not fully, but they can chip away at it. One bow, one flail swing, one silence at a time. You fall asleep wondering how long before there's nothing left to chip. Chapter 6. Afternoon chores and medieval gossip. The next morning arrives with fog. A thick, milky kind that seeps into your clothes, your bones, even your thoughts. You wake up feeling like you never actually slept, like you just closed your eyes for a moment and reopened them in the same misery. Outside, the village is quieter than usual. The mist hushes everything, muffling footsteps, muting animal calls, turning even a Reeves barks into something less sharp. For a moment, it feels like the world is holding its breath. Then you hear the gossip. IT starts as whispers by the well and builds into full-fledged chatter by the bakehouse. Someone leans close, eyes wide, voice low. The bailiff's seen the tanner's daughter. You raise an eyebrow. "So, she's betrothed to the Reeves' cousin." "Ah, there it is." This isn't just gossip. It's potential combustion. The Reeve and the bailiff don't exactly sit me together. One controls the labor. The other controls the punishment. Technically, they're both under the Lord's authority. but they act like rival kings of a muddy chessboard. And now, romance drama. You pretend not to care. You really do. But after days of monotony and fatigue, this is gold. You linger near the bakehouse, pretending to check for fresh crumbs and listen in. Apparently, someone saw them together near the old pigsty. Someone else says she gave him a ribbon. Another claims the tanner's daughter confessed to a priest, and he promptly passed out. Historians still argue whether medieval priests were better at handling scandal or just fainted a lot. Eventually, the gossip shifts because someone always has something juicier. Did you hear about Thomas the Dyer? You perk up. No, you have not. He got caught sneaking off with an extra loaf from the manor kitchens. That's bold, dangerous, but relatable. They say he's been locked in the stocks all morning, on full display by the churchyard, arms out, neck trapped, with a sign above him reading thief in wobbly chalk. You pass by later, and yep, there he is, looking thoroughly miserable and surrounded by heckling kids tossing pebbles. You pause for a moment. Part of you pities him. Another part quietly wonders if he managed to eat some of that bread before getting caught. The day drags on. You're assigned to help with laundry, one of the more underrated punishments of medieval life. Not just scrubbing and wringing, but carrying heavy tubs of water from the river, then heating them over fire. Your back protests immediately. So does your nose. Between the linen, the lye soap, and the sheer volume of human effort that's soaked into these fabrics, the scent is unforgettable. You and three others form a half-hearted laundry brigade. There's Patricia, who curses like a sailor and always carries a dagger for wolves or weirdos. There's Agnes, too quiet for someone who clearly knows everyone's secrets. And there's a boy named William, who sings through everything. Even when off dash key to ASU work, the stories flow about the bailiff, about the tanner's daughter, about a priest who got drunk and baptized a goat by accident. The goat, by the way, is doing fine. Agnes finally speaks up, low and careful. My sister says the Lord's nephew is visiting soon. That gets your attention, and oh, one likes the Lord's nephew. He's young, smug, and once ordered a dog to be painted with stripes for sport. His arrival usually means extra duties, random inspections, and once, a bonfire made entirely of confiscated ale. You groan aloud. Patricia flips her dagger. If he tries anything stupid this time, she says, I'll wash his fancy socks with sheep dung. It's probably a joke. Probably today, as the afternoon wears on, you're told to deliver some mended tunics to the manor. You trudge up the hill, basket in hand, watching your footing on the slippery path. The manor looms like always, cold stone, narrow windows, a reminder that you're always on the outside looking in. You knock at the back door. A kitchen maid answers, clearly flustered, red-cheeked, hair escaping its scarf. Busy in there? You ask, just to make conversation. She rolls her eyes. Lord's nephew just arrived. Want hot cider, a warm bath, and, get this, a loop performance. He's already insulted the cook's hat and called the stable boy a manure elf. You snort. Classic. Back in the village. Evening's approaching. Smoke coils from chimneys. The bell tolls low and slow, and the fog finally lifts just enough to reveal a setting sun that looks, for once, like it might be smiling. You sit near the fire pit, boots steaming, hands outstretched. Around you, the village winds down. A woman braids her daughter's hair. Someone sharpens tools in a slow, rhythmic motion. William hums an old lullaby about a river spirit and a boy who tried to catch the moon. Then, out of nowhere, someone says, Did you hear? The miller's wife caught a heron in her fishnet. You look up. A heron? She says it whispered something before flying away. You pause. What did it whisper? He shrugs. She won't say. Silence settles. No one pushes for more. It's not about truth. It's about wonder. As you rise to head home, the reeve passes you on the path. He nods barely. You nod lower, proper. No words. Just a game. Inside your hut, you light your candle stub and sit quietly, the goat already curled up in the corner. You watch the flame, thinking of whispered herons, striped dogs, and painted goats, of singing boys, scandalous kisses, and parsnip stew, and for the first time in a while, you smile. Not because it's better, but because it's weirder. And weird in this world is a kind of salvation. Chapter 7. Holy days and unholy taxes today is different. Not because the mud is any less clingy or the sky any less gray, but because it's a holy day, which means no work. Sort of. Holy days are complicated. They're meant to be for rest and worship, a pause in the relentless grind of medieval life. But somehow they always end up feeling like more labor in disguise. The church has you by the soul, and the manor has you by the shoulders. You still wake early, still feed the goat, still stretch your aching limbs into the same overwashed tunic. But instead of a flail, you carry a prayer book you can't read and hope no one asks you to recite anything. You follow a procession up the hill to the village chapel, a squat little structure that smells like incense, mildew, and lost secrets. The priest stands at the door, greeting each of you with a nod that suggests he hasn't slept in days. He probably hasn't. Last night, there was confession, which around here usually means 3 actual sins and 2 dozen complaints about goats, witches, and soggy bread. Inside, you kneel on a cushion that is comforting as a pile of acorns. The air is heavy with silence and smoke. The stained glass above the altar catches a shaft of pale light, casting colored patches on the stone floor like a slow moving kaleidoscope. You glance around. Everyone's doing their best imitation of reverence, except the Reeve, who's always watching, and Barbara, who might actually be asleep. The priest begins his sermon. It's in Latin, of course, which means it could be a recipe for goose stew or the plot of French tragedy for all you know. But the cadence is soothing. Up, down, pause. It wraps around you like a lullaby made of old rules. Then he shifts into the local tongue. Let us remember, he says, that the tithe is not just coin, but kindness, labor, loyalty. Ah, the money part. You brace yourself. Sure enough, after the service, the priest and 2 aides set up a table just outside the chapel, parchment scrolls unrolled, ink pots ready. It's time to record the tithes. You line up, shuffling forward slowly, clutching your offering, a small bag of barley and a clutch of half-wilted leeks. It's not much, but it's not nothing. When you reach the table, the aide eyes your bundle, then sniffs at the leeks. Bit limp, he says. So am I. You reply before you can stop yourself. The priest smirks. The aide does not. Your name gets scratched onto the list, and the offering added to a growing pile that's somehow both sacred and depressing. You walk away, lighter in goods, but heavier in resentment. Back in the village square, people gather in loose clumps. There's music now. Someone strumming a lute, someone else beating a drum. That might be a turned over bucket. A few children dance. A dog chases its own tail and wins. There's food too. Not a feast exactly, but better than usual. Trenchers filled with lentils and carrot stew, hard cheese that softens if you sit on it long enough, and even a bit of dried apple. You get a bowl and sit on the edge of a broken cartwheel, savoring each bite like it's your last meal, which, historically speaking, is always a possibility. Someone nearby starts singing a bawdy tune about a monk and a barrel of ale. The priest pretends not to hear. The Reeve doesn't. He scowls but says nothing. Too many people are watching. For a moment, there's a strange sense of ease. The music, the food, the communal warmth. It's enough to almost forget the hierarchy, the dirt, the debts. Almost, because then the taxes. The Lord Steward arrives near dusk. Not the Lord himself, of course. He wouldn't deign to walk through the common square unless something was on fire or being hunted. But the steward comes in a fine cloak, smelling faintly of spiced wine and self-satisfaction. He climbs onto a barrel and clears his throat. His lordship, he says, is grateful for your continued service and piety. Polite murmur. And reminds you that harvest yields are due next quarter day. Wheat, barley, or coin equivalent. Groans. And the additional hearth tax, approved at Michaelmas, shall now be collected. You hear it before you feel it. The low collective exhale of frustration. The hearth tax? Again, people start muttering. Some pretend they didn't hear. Others, like David, start counting their fingers as if that'll summon more coins. You glance toward the manor house, its windows glinting in the fading light. It looks down at you all like a stone deity. Distant, unreachable, the steward dismounts. The celebration begins to unravel. You finish your stew in silence, suddenly very aware of your threadbare tunic and empty pouch. The joy of the holy day thins like smoke and wind. Later that evening, you return to the chapel, not for prayer, but because you heard the priest is giving out leftover communion bread to those who ask nicely. You ask. He gives you a crust and a tired smile. On your way home, you pass the stocks again. Empty now. But someone's written on the board. Free Thomas. You smile. Just a little AT your hut. The goat greets you like a loyal dog. You sit beside the fire pit, feeding it crusts and wondering if you'll manage to keep your own children out of the same life, should you ever have any. And then the wind shifts. Soft, cold, almost whispering. You look to the stars. They're bright tonight. Maybe, just maybe, next holy day will feel more holy. Chapter 8. Runaway dreams and actual punishments. You wake the next morning with a strange feeling that your dreams had sharp edges. Not a nightmare exactly, just the uncomfortable sensation that you were running or hiding, or both. And you can't remember if you got away, that it's the sort of morning where the air feels like wet wool. You cough once, twice, and your breath hangs in the air like fogged up regret. Outside, the frost has finally retreated, replaced by a deep squelch that clings to your boots and soul alike. You step into square and immediately hear the rumor. A slave ran away last night. You freeze. The speaker is a shepherd girl, wide-eyed, whispering like she's afraid even the wind might snitch. From Lord Edric's estate. Slipped out during the night. Took a horse, too. Now that's bold. Lord Edric is one of those names everyone knows, even though he's not your lord. His manor lies 2 hills over, and he's famous for 3 things: cruel punishments, an obsession with falcons, and a perfectly trimmed beard that locals suspect of sorcery. You glance around. The gossip is spreading fast, zipping through the village like a mouse on fire. Everyone's talking about it, and not in a celebratory way. There's tension, worry, because if a slave escapes from one manor, every nearby estate tightens its grip just in case to be why noon. The reeve is pacing, eyes darting, voice sharper than usual. The bailiff, yes, that same one rumored to be tangled with the tanner's daughter, is making rounds, checking everyone's hut like he expects to find a stowaway under the bed. Or maybe a missing spoon. With him, it's hard to tell. You return to your task, splitting fence posts for the pigsty. Try and keep your head down. But your thoughts won't stay quiet. You keep picturing it. The daring bolt into the night. The stolen horse. The cold wind in the face of someone finally doing what you've only dreamed of. Running, of course, the punishment for running is, well, unpleasant. Historians still argue about the exact treatment of fugitive slaves in the Middle Ages, but most agree it was rarely merciful. Branding, hobbling, public shaming, sometimes mutilation, sometimes worse. Lords believed fear was the best deterrent, and honestly, it worked to be why mid-afternoon, someone returns from the forest with news. The escapee's trail has gone cold. Literally. The rain last night erased the hoofprints, and the woods are too thick to track easily. This sets off a storm of speculation. Some say he's hiding in a nearby village. Others swear he had help. From a priest, from a lover, from a group of traveling monks who definitely look suspicious. You keep quiet, chewing on the same question over and over. Would you? Could you? There's always a part of you that entertains the idea. Who hasn't stood on a ridge and stared at the tree line, imagining what lies beyond? Who hasn't wondered if they could just disappear, but then reality rears its muddy head? Where would you go? The cities? Dangerous, crowded, full of people who would sell you out for a hot loaf. The forests? Wolves. Outlaws. Spirits, if you believe the tanner's wife. Even if you made it far enough, you'd need a story. A name, maybe a coin or two. You don't have any of that. You remember old Bartram, who tried to run 15 years ago. He made it to the next valley. Lasted 2 days. They brought him back with a limp and a silence that never left. You still see him sometimes, muttering to himself in the corner of the alewife's shack. Still, you wonder to tea supper. The mood is heavy. No music, no jokes, just the sound of chewing and distant barking. Even the goat seems subdued. You eat your lentil mash and think about hooves thundering through the mist, a cloak flapping the wind, the taste of freedom chased by fear. Then you hear shouting. You rush outside. Others gather too, crowding toward the chapel road, where torches bob in the darkness. A search party. The steward from Lord Edric's Manor is leading them. Tall, severe, with a voice like broken iron. They stop in the square. Everyone watches. If anyone harbors a fugitive, he announces, you will face his punishment. No one breathes. If you hear anything, see anything, feel your conscience stir, report it to your reeve immediately. He holds up a chain. Thick, rusted, sharp-edged. Else you may wear this. The message lands. They march off again. The torchlight fades. You return to your hut in silence. The goat presses close to your leg, perhaps sensing something. You sit, staring into the dark, and wonder if someone knocked on your door right now, bleeding, starving, terrified. Would you let them in? You want to say yes, but the truth is you're not sure, and that, somehow, feels worse than anything. Chapter 9. Witchcraft, Fear, and Your Neighbor's Cat. It starts with thunder. Not overhead, not yet, but off in the distance, a low rolling rumble that doesn't quite sound like weather. You wake with a jolt, the kind that makes you wonder if your name was shouted or your dream just ended too loud. The goat stirs too, ears twitching. Rain's coming. Again. But there's something else in the air, heavier than weather, thicker than mist. You pull on your cloak and step outside. The village is already buzzing. Not working, not shouting, buzzing. That strange middle ground between curiosity and dread. Because during the night, someone's been accused of witchcraft. Yes. Again. This time, it's the miller's daughter. You've known her since you were both knee-high to pigs. Her name's Emily, and she once bet you a beat she could climb the chapel wall faster than anyone. She won. No sorcery, just legs like a deer and less regard for broken bones than most. Now she's sitting on the edge of the well, eyes red, arms wrapped tight around herself. A few villagers are gathered near her, whispering. Not angry. Not yet. Just scared. That kind of scare that looks for a scapegoat. Or a cat. Speaking of which, a lean, black cat is perched on the edge of a thatched roof nearby, staring with a casual indifference only cats and very successful merchants can manage. It's her cat, of course, named Pepper. And of course, someone just muttered, it's always a cat. You walk closer and catch snippets of the accusation. She said my bread would go flat, and it did. Old Fergus's cow went dry after Emily passed him on the road. She talks to birds. Yeah, that last one's true. You've seen it. She mimics bird calls just for fun. But fun is a dangerous luxury in a world where laughter can sound like rebellion. The priest is called. He arrives quickly, robes flapping, eyes darting. He's young, not yet bitter enough to lose sleep, but the pressure to do something is on him now. Everyone looks to him like he's a judge in a play no one rehearsed. He clears his throat. We will pray first. Everyone bows their heads. Except you. You watch Emily. She's still, too still. The prayer is long. You count at least 3 mentions of Satan, 2 of fire, and 1 oddly specific curse involving mildew. When it ends, people disperse, but the tension doesn't. You walk over to her. You all right? You ask. She shrugs. I haven't cursed anyone lately, unless it was on accident. You try to smile. It doesn't land. That night, someone paints a crude symbol on her door, a spiral inside a cross. Which sign? They whispered it's nonsense, of course. But enough nonsense spoken with conviction becomes law. Historians still argue whether medieval Europe had systematic witch hunts before the more infamous ones of the 15th and 16th centuries. But isolated accusations? Oh, those were already in full swing. Usually women, usually poor, usually inconvenient. Over the next few days, things get weirder. The weather turns fast, cold and wet, then suddenly hot. Crops wilt. A pig goes missing. Pepper the cat disappears, then returns with a dead vole and attitude. People start avoiding Emily. Not overtly, just enough. She notices. You bring her a loaf one evening. She accepts it with a nod, but doesn't smile. I think they want me gone, she says. You glance toward the chapel. You could confess. Ask the priest to vouch for you. She laughs. And if he doesn't, you don't answer. Then one night, lightning strikes the chapel roof that no joke. Actual lightning. It cracks the sky like God stubbed a celestial toe and took it out on your thatched spiritual center. The top burns. Just a little. enough to draw a crowd. No one's hurt. But that doesn't stop the whispers. The next morning, they gather again. More serious this time. More certain. Which, demon vessel, she spoke a storm into the sky. You're there when they come to her hut. She doesn't run. Just stand with her hands visible, expression unreadable. The priest tries to calm them. We do not burn. We question. We examine. Reassuring, right? They take her to the manor's granary, a building rarely used for grain, and more often used for things that don't need sunlight. You want to help. Say something. Do something. But fear is thick. It clogs your throat like old smoke. And then there's your neighbor, Gerard. Remember him? Goat enthusiast, occasional false accuser? He corners you later, grinning like he's done something clever. I told him about her cat, he says. Said it blinked at me funny. You stare at him, that he shrugs. Better her than someone else, right? The words hit like stones, because he's not wrong. That's the system. Survival by sacrifice. Point the finger before it points at you. You go home. You sit by the fire. You try not to think of Emily in that cold stone room, surrounded by silence and suspicion. The goat curls at your feet, twitching in sleep. And you wonder, when did fear become so familiar? When did it start wearing the same boots as routine? When did you stop being surprised? Chapter 10, Love, Marriage, and Your Lord's Permission. It begins with a stolen glance. You're carrying buckets to the well when you see her. Ashley from the far side of the village. The one who gave you stew once. She's standing outside her hut, brushing flour from her sleeves. Hair caught in a shaft of sunlight, like some saint from a church window. She looks up. You look away, because you're not supposed to be looking. Not at her. Not like that. Later, she finds you by the paddock. I heard they're moving Emily to the city court, she says casually, though her fingers are busy wringing her apron. Father says the Lord wants her gone before the bishop arrives. You nod. She doesn't leave. Then, after a long pause, do you ever think about getting married? You nearly drop the bucket. Because yes, of course, all the time. But you also know what that question really means is she's asking if you've asked the Lord's permission, because legally you can't marry without it. It's not like you could just kneel in a field, pick some daisies, and call yourselves joined. In the Middle Ages, especially if you're unfree, love comes with paperwork and fees, sometimes livestock, sometimes a really annoying sermon about duty and fertility. Have you? She asks. You shake your head. Can't afford the license. And just like that, the smile she'd been wearing flickers out. The marriage license is a tax, essentially. Another way for the manor to extract coin or grain, or your future children's labor in advance. Historians still debate how strictly these rules were enforced. Some lords relax, others painfully exact. Yours? Squarely in the painfully exact camp. I asked once, she says, voice low. They wanted 2 hens and a silver coin. We barely have turnips. You want to tell her you'd steal the moon if it would help. But instead you just say, maybe later. That night, you lie awake on your pallet, the goat snoring softly, and you think about what later means. In this world, later is a gamble. It means hoping you both survive the winter, avoid disease, stay in favor, and somehow scrounge enough to buy the right to be together. That's a lot of ifs. Still, something changes. The next day, you start carving something. It's a ring. Well, a ring-shaped piece of wood. Oak. Sanded smooth with a scrap of linen. It's crude, but it fits. You hide it in a hollow near the chapel's foundation, just in case. Meanwhile, the reeve has apparently decided to make your life harder. He assigns you to muck the sheep pens. Every morning. For a week, you take it in stride, barely, but the sheep pens have one upside. Quiet, which gives you time to think. You think about Ashley, about love, about how absurd it is that your heart needs permission to beat for someone else, about the irony that the church teaches love is sacred. But the manor says sure, but only if you pay for it. On day 3, Ashley appears with basket. Bread, she says. And news. You wipe sheep muck from your hands. Both welcome. They're setting a new tithe, she says. If you want to marry, you'll have to pay a dowry and pledge one of your future children to the Lord's service. You blink. Like a deposit? She nods. a labor bond. You sit on the fence, stunned, because it's no longer just a matter of chickens or coins. It's your hypothetical children, promised before they're born, signed into work they didn't choose. You look at her. She looks back. Do you still want to? She asks. You don't answer right away. Because what you want and what you can do are oceans apart. Yes, you finally say, but maybe not here. Her eyes narrow. You mean run. You don't respond. Not exactly. That night, you return to the ring. You hold it in your hand, trace the grain with your thumb, and imagine a world where no Lord decides your future. Where marriage is a promise between two people, not a tax arrangement. The next day, Ashley doesn't meet your eyes. She's busy. Or pretending to be. Rumors spread that a wedding is happening soon between a freed servant and the blacksmith's daughter. The Lord is waiving the fee, apparently. Some kind of favor. You try not to feel bitter. But you do, because freedom buys love. And love, apparently, isn't free. Later, as the sun sets, you find Ashley near the goat pens. She doesn't speak, just holds out her hand. You press the ring into her palm. She closes her fingers around it. And for one brief moment, no reeve, no priest, no Lord can touch you. Just two hearts. Quiet, defiant, still beating. Chapter 11. Midnight illnesses and strange remedies. You wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, limbs tangled in your blanket like you've been wrestling ghosts. Outside, the wind howls in long, aching moans, the kind that makes shutters rattle and old beams groan like they're remembering something traumatic from a previous life. Your head is on fire. Not literally, but it might as well be. Fever. Great. You sit up slowly, each movement a test will, every muscle mutinous. Your mouth tastes like spoiled onions and regret. Even the goat gives you a concerned look, which is deeply unnerving to your sick. You know this kind of sick, not the sniffles or the seasonal cough. This is a deep down, bone aching, world swimming sick that people use to survive. Sometimes. You lie back down, staring at the ceiling, feeling every heartbeat echo in your skull, like a blacksmith with a vengeance. You need help. You need medicine. You need a miracle. What you get is Patricia. Patricia is the village herbalist, or, as the church prefers to call her, the woman we tolerate because she's statistically useful but makes us deeply uncomfortable. She appears at your doorway without knocking, holding a bundle of pungent herbs and wearing a frown that could stop a charging boar. You're burning up, she mutters, already pushing inside. Let me see your tongue. You oblige. She squints. Foul. Thank you. She snorts. Not a compliment. Lie back. She starts mixing something in a wooden bowl, muttering to herself. You catch bits and pieces. Fever root, foxglove, not too much, and he's got the look of a man who thinks love is worth illness. That last part might have been directed at you. She presses a cool cloth to your forehead, then feeds you a spoonful of something that tastes like boiled earth and licorice regret. You gag. She presses your chest back down. If you throw it up, I'll make you drink double. You swallow it down. Outside, the rain begins. Of course. She stays a while, changing your cloths, forcing more bitter brews down your throat, then placing nettle leaves on your wrists to draw out the heat. You ask if that's actually how fevers work. Don't sass me, she replies. I've outlived 3 husbands and 2 wolves. Fair enough. The next day is worse. You drift in and out of consciousness. The room twists. Time unravels. You think you hear Ashley's voice, then the Reeves, then something about a chicken playing the lute. Fever dreams are cruel like that. At some point, someone brings broth. Maybe it's Ashley. Maybe it's the goat. Either way, you drink IT to be Y Day 3. You start returning to yourself. Not fully. Your body still aches and your head feels like it's stuffed with wet wool, but your vision stops swimming, and you can sit upright without vomiting. Patricia returns, takes one look at you and grunts. Still ugly, but alive. High praise. She leaves behind a pouch of dried herbs and instructions you mostly ignore. You sit by the door, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain pool and the ruts outside. You feel like you've missed something. Time moved and you didn't. And then Ashley appears. She doesn't say much. Just sits beside you, her cloak damp, her eyes tired. She hands you a folded scrap of cloth. Inside is a small twist of dried berries and a note. You owe me a dance. Don't die before we're free. You smile. Did you come just to mock my near death? She shrugs. And to see if your goat could cook. Disappointed on both counts. You sit together in silence, listening to the rain and the faint echo of bells from the manor. Somewhere, someone's shouting. Somewhere, someone's crying. But here now, it's just the two of you that you're still sick. You're still unfree. The world still spins on the same uneven axle of injustice and mud. But you're not alone, and sometimes that's the best medicine there is. Chapter 12. Your children aren't really yours. The weather clears slowly, like a stubborn thought finally making sense. Blue skies begin peeking between gray clouds. The rain soaked ground exhales steam by mid morning, and everything smells like wet wood and new grass. You feel better. Not great, but better. You stand upright without blacking out. A small miracle. Your first stop, naturally, is the goat, who headbutts you gently in the shin like a passive aggressive apology for not nursing you back to health. Your second stop is the communal fire pit, where you re enter the world like a slightly scorched biscuit that's been forgotten in the oven, present, edible, and a little confused. And that's when you hear it. Someone says it casually, like they're talking about the weather or bad ale. Lord's taking a census of all working age children next week. You freeze mid sip of watery ale. What for? Assessment, says a man next to you, chewing on something green and questionable. Inventory. Maybe labor redistribution. Maybe taxes. Could be anything. That's when the truth hits you like a drop barrel of turnips. Your children, should you ever have any, won't belong to you. They'll be born into bondage. Just like you. Their names, their futures, their marriages, all subject to approval. If the Reeve wants your son to plow fields at age 9, so be it. If the Lord wants your daughter to spin wool for the manor until her fingers fall off, he needn't ask. And if the tax man decides his state needs more tithes, your children will be counted like sheep weighed in grain. You feel your stomach twist, not the fever again, but something colder, deeper. A realization that sits in your bones. Because it's one thing to suffer, it's another to imagine passing that suffering on. You walk to the chapel later not to pray, but to ask. You find the priest sweeping ash from the altar, humming something solemn. He looks up and smiles. Recovered, I see. You nod. Father, is it true that our children don't belong to us? He pauses, long enough that the silence becomes its own sermon. They belong to God, he says gently, but their labor belongs to the land. And there it is, as calmly stated as if you'd asked about the weather. You walk back to the village with your jaw clenched. You pass old Hugh, who's carving spoons. He shrugs. Same for me. Same for you. Same for my da and my da's da. We're born with calluses. You want to scream, or run, or find someone who remembers what freedom feels like. But instead, you help repair the fence near the grazing field, because duty is louder than fury, and no one else knows how to fix a latch. That evening, Anna joins you for supper. She brings cheese that tastes like bark and a handful of fresh greens. You share what little you have. She watches you as you chew and finally says, "You're thinking about children." You nod. How could I not? My mother once said, she murmurs, that in our world, children are hope you can't keep. You lend them to the future and pray it doesn't break them. You sit in silence. Then she adds, "But we don't have to make that future here." She doesn't explain. Doesn't need to. The words echo anyway. Later, you help her carry water from the well. The stars are already out, blinking like cold eyes, and someone singing a lullaby about a raven who stole the moon. You wonder if birds have laws, if they pass ownership down like curses. "To your door," she pauses. "If we leave, we'll be hunted." You nod. "If we stay, we'll lose more than our freedom." You nod again. She doesn't kiss you. She doesn't have to. The space between you is full of knowing. That night, you dream of walking away. Just walking. No torches. No dogs. Just footsteps in the dirt and two hands joined tightly. And behind you, quiet still, are all the children you never had, waving goodbye, unchained. Chapter 13. The castle party you'll never attend, you're awoken at dawn by the sound of trumpets. Not pleasant, triumphant trumpets. These are brassy, nasal things that sound like someone is trying to scare the sun itself back behind the hills. You sit up fast, heart racing, blanket tangled, and catch a glimpse of movement on the hill above. The manor is buzzing. Servants dart across the lawn. Flags ripple from the gate. You hear the clatter of hooves and a very distinct shout. Make way for his lordship's honored guests. Ah, a castle party. Not for you, obviously. You're already late for morning duty, cleaning the manor's exterior privies. Yes, the literal crap holes of nobility. The irony isn't lost on you. While they toast each other with goblet of imported wine and peel roasted pheasants with knives more expensive than your life, you're hauling buckets of waste down to the dung pit. You pass the kitchen doors just as someone opens them. Heat and aroma rush out like a tidal wave of injustice. Roast duck, honey bread, stewed apples. You stop in your tracks. Your stomach lets out a growl so aggressive you check to see if the goat heard it from home. Inside, you catch a glimpse of the banquet hall, golden candlelight flickering off polished goblets, velvet drapes, tapestries depicting battles none of you were invited to lose. A servant rushes past. Careful, that's for the second course. You? You're the after course. You're the one who cleans the privy after the nobles finish eating, drinking, and congratulating each other on how refined they are. Outside, the guests are arriving in style. Horse-drawn carriages with actual suspension, cloaks that shimmer, gloves. You didn't even know gloves could shimmer. You see one man get helped down by two attendants. He sneezes delicately into a lace kerchief, looks around, and says, "Is that peasants I smell?" "Yes, my lord, that would be us." The party kicks off with a hunt. Nobles mount their horses, hounds bark, horns blare. You and others are forced to walk ahead to flush out game. Basically, scare the rabbits so they look more impressive when a lord shoots them. You get scratched by a thorn bush. One noble shoots at a squirrel and nearly hits you. Another falls off his horse and demands someone bring him revitalizing cordial. You bring him ditch water. He doesn't notice. After the hunt, the real feast begins. You return to the manor to dump the chamber pots and catch another peek through the window. A woman in a gown so wide it probably needs its own cart is dancing with a man whose hat costs more than your hut. The music is lively. Pipes, drums, some string thing that's more expensive than truth. The dancers twirl. The servants sweat. The reeve hovers at the edge of the room, trying to pretend he belongs. Then something odd happens. Point one of the lords, drunk and clearly bored, insists on a demonstration of peasant talents. His words, "Not yours, you're summoned." You, Leaf the singer, and Marjorie the sharp-tongued spoon carver. They make you stand in the courtyard under torchlight, like exhibits in a traveling zoo. Do something. One of them slurs. Leaf sings. Marjorie whittles a crude caricature of the drunken lord. You just stand there. "I've seen better jesters in the stables." Someone laughs. You bow. Deep, too deep. The nobles laugh. You return to your chores, cheeks hot. Later, Anna finds you by the refuse pile, washing your hands. "They made you dance?" she asks. "Close enough." She looks away, lips tight. "My mother once said nobles are like thunder. Loud, useless, and mostly just wet air." You smile that ate tea the end of the night. You help clear away the leftovers. A few scraps of meat, some half-eaten bread, the bones from the quail they didn't like. You scoop them into a cloth. This you'll share with others. Maybe even celebrate. You pass the ballroom again and glance inside. They're still dancing, still laughing, still floating through a world you'll never be invited to live in. "Just, sir," as you turn away. A steward blocks your path. You take this to the fire. He hands you a gilded tray with untouched pastries, then nods toward the flames. You pause. "They're not wanted?" Too soft. You nod. Then, instead of the fire, you slip them into your cloak. Later, under starlight, you and Anna eat them together in the dark. Each bite tastes like sugar, almonds, and defiance. Chapter 14. Plague rumors and mysterious peddler. The storm rolls in before dawn, announced by a groan from the wind and a sudden, bone-deep chill that seeps through every wall in the village. You wake to the sound of rattling shutters and distant shouts. Someone's livestock has panicked and broken loose. Again, you sit up slowly, stomach full of stolen almond pastries and consequences. The goat is already awake, blinking at you like it's bracing for the apocalypse. You're not far behind. Rain begins hammering the thatch roof like it owes it money. You pull your cloak tight and step outside into a world that's gone from gray and dreary to actively menacing. The air smells of lightning and wet earth. The kind of day where things happen. Sure enough, they do be why mid-morning. Word is spread fast and the reeve can squint. A plague is coming. Someone saw a rider gallop to the crossroads last night, cloaked, masked, shouting warnings. Others say a monk passed through the nearby hamlet of Beast Hollow and collapsed in the chapel, black spots on his chest, breath like a forged bellows. And now, the fear is teeth. You gather with the rest in the village square, under a sky that can't decide whether to weep or rage. The priest speaks first, solemn, voice nearly lost to the wind. The pestilence may be upon us. We must prepare. Prepare. Ha! As if Nettie the herbalist rolls her eyes. You can't prepare for wind that comes through your skin, she mutters. But you can try not to lick strangers. The priest pretends not to hear her. He advises prayer, isolation, and something about boiling your water. The reeve, predictably, suggests doubling work to finish the harvest before everyone keels over. Classic. Then, like clockwork, the peddler arrives. Yes, that peddler. The one with too many pockets and a grin like he's always 3 lives ahead of the truth. His cart creaks into the square, piled high with oddities. Bundles of garlic, wax seals, little wooden saints, and glass vials filled with what looks suspiciously like ditch water. Good people, he bellows. Fear not. I bring remedies, proven protections against the black breath and the devil's rash. He waves a bag of what might be dried rat tails. Someone gasps. Someone else faints. You and Anna watch from the side, half hidden behind a broken fence. This feels familiar, she says. Which part? The part where someone profits from panic. You nod. He sold me a worm once. Told me it was a lucky eel. The peddler starts hawking a new item, a plague talisman, shaped like a star, carved from elder wood, guaranteed to ward off illness if worn near the heart. Guaranteed by who? You mutter and he hears you. Smiles. By experience, my friend. Yours. Yours if you survive. You walk away before you start shouting. Back at your hut, the atmosphere thickens. Rain turns to mist, then fog, then silence. A kind of waiting. That evening, you and Anna sit inside, candles lit low, sipping something hot and bitter from a shared cup. The goat paces. Even he can feel the tension. Do you think it's real? She asks softly. The plague? She nods. You think of the peddler's words. The priest's warnings. The stories, some truth, some terror, some too detailed to ignore. I think, you say slowly, that fear doesn't wait for truth. She watches the candle flicker. Would you still leave with me if it comes? You pause and nod. Because there is again that idea that maybe the only cure for all of this, the reeve, the taxes, the unpaid love and own futures, is to just go. But tonight you don't run. You stay. Because you haven't seen it yet. And even fear has a rhythm here. You lie awake, listening to the wind play through the trees like a warning. Somewhere a dog howls. Somewhere someone coughs. You press the talisman Anna carved into your palm, not elderwood, just pine, and whisper a prayer you don't fully believe. Because hope, like fear, doesn't need proof to be real. And tomorrow, the world might change. Again, chapter 15, you die, but not before paying your last tax. It starts the next morning. A knock on your door, not frantic, not panic, just steady. You open it to find Gerard. He's pale, shivering, eyes too wide. They found someone, he says, in the next village. Black spots, bleeding, gone before sunset. You close the door. Slowly. The goat watches you like it understands S.O. It's here, the plague, or something close enough. That day, everything changes. The reeve calls for a meeting, but few come. The square is nearly empty. Those who arrive stand far apart. Hoods up, scarves tied across mouths like cloth armor. For once, he doesn't bark orders. He just tells people to be wise and stay away. You all pretend that's a plan by midday. The baker has closed her ovens. The priest has barricaded himself inside the chapel, promising prayers from a distance. Nettie nails a list at her door, remedies, rumors, and a polite, don't knock if you're bleeding. You and Anna pack a little. just in case. Some grain, a small knife, the wooden ring. You don't say goodbye to anyone. No one does. Not out of rudeness, but out of fear, as if farewells make things too real. You spend the night staring at the sky through the roof's thatch gaps. The stars are still there. Calm, cold, unconcerned. And then, around midnight, you hear it. The sound of a bell, not the chapel's. Not the manor's, not a slow, distant toll. Faint, repeating. You glance at Anna. The death bell, she whispers, it's coming from the next village over. The one you used to trade with. The one whose name you never learned because you didn't think you needed to. The next morning, you find the first body. Old Bartram, slumped against the side of the bakehouse. Eyes closed, mouth open, dark stains on his tunic. No one moves him. No one touches him. The reeve marks the wall beside him with chalk. A warning. You don't return to the square. No one does. Everyone begins to vanish into their homes or into the woods. Anna suggests leaving now. You hesitate. You feel frozen, like your feet have grown roots and your mind is sinking with them. This is the only world you've ever known, the only dirt your blood has mixed with. But you remember something Nettie once said: staying in a burning house doesn't make you brave, it makes you dinner. So you say yes. That night you pack quietly. Anna does the same. You both wear cloaks, hoods, soft shoes. The goat follows without needing an invitation. You walk to the village slowly. You pass huts you helped build. You pass the chapel where you pretended to believe. You pass the manor gates. Locked. Silent. No guards that and oh one stops you. You reach the edge of the forest. The path is dark, narrow, full of snapping twigs and imagined dangers. You take it anyway. Behind you, the world doesn't burn to IT fades into mist, memory, and the kind of silence that leaves a mark. The goat bleats softly. Anna squeezes your hand. You walk into the trees, and you don't look back. The path beneath your feet softens as you go, mud giving way to moss, the hard weight of days lightening with each step. You don't speak. You don't need to. The forest is a quiet companion now, whispering with leaves and the low rustle of unseen things just beyond your lantern's glow. Behind you, the village shrinks into a memory. Familiar pains become soft echoes. Familiar fears begin to lose their sharp edges, that it's not freedom yet. Not truly. But it's something that beginning. The air is cool here, not biting. And with each breath, you draw in a little more of yourself. The version of you that could be, the one not owned, not recorded, not reduced to tally marks on a steward scroll. Anna hums something as you walk. A lullaby, maybe. A tune your bones already know. The goat trots ahead, tail wagging lazily, like it always knew you'd leave eventually. In the sky above, the stars blink softly, scattered across the black like breadcrumbs leading onward. They don't guide you, not exactly, but they stay with you, steady, silent, watching. Eventually you stop by a stream. The water gurgles gently, threading through mossy stones like it's been waiting for someone to notice. You lie back, your head on a smooth rock, the cloak tucked around your shoulders. Anna settles beside you, her breath sinking with yours. The night deepens. The forest hushes, and finally, you begin to rest that you're not a serf now, not a slave, just a soul in the dark, safe for the moment, wrapped in quiet, and drifting, drifting,